Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios. We are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. Nick Frazier is here today. Hello, Nick.
Hello?
That was a very quick hello.
Sorry. Hands full.
That's okay.
Good to see you.
No, that's okay.
Good to hear you.
No. Everything's great. Good to have Nick Frazier in the house. So the NFL owners' meetings are continuing. And we've got Trevor Matich at 4:30 today, as always. Barry Trotz will join us at 4 o'clock because we are out today early at 5 o'clock for the Preds game. They are having the animated broadcast this evening on News Channel 5. Now, again, I'm going to get more into this animated broadcast. Max Hers, Chris Mason on the call. But with this animated broadcast, this Music City Hockey Night, whatever it is with the Columbus game, my son is now basically 4 months old. And he is very aware of kind of colors and things going on and recognizing people now and everything else. And he has gotten into these YouTube videos with these little characters and colors and songs. And I mean, I love it, but it also drives me crazy at the same time. I am excited to see. He loves watching sports. Again, I think it's the colors, moving on the television that he likes so much. I am excited to see him watch this animated hockey broadcast tonight. And then hopefully we'll talk to Barry Trotz about how the Predators are going to get good in the near future so that my son does not become a Maple Leafs fan. But I want to start on the Titans. So I am starting to have a fear of something that deep down inside, I actually kind of hope the first part of the equation happens. I believe the Tennessee Titans, deep down inside, want to trade the number 1 overall pick. I know, again, every insider has said the same thing, which is, and TD said this the day he left the combine on that Sunday, if the Titans use the number 1 pick, they're going to use it on Cam Ward. And I agree with that. But I think they want to trade the pick. That's why every insider, Schefter, Rappaport, Schrager, Rossini, even the locals, TD, PK, have said it looks like Cam Ward. And today at the owners' meetings at the Breakers Hotel in Palm Beach, Florida, the Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News, who covers the Giants, said that Mike Borgonzi was having a little coffee with Joe Shane, the general manager of the New York Giants. Charles Robinson was on the program last week on Robbie and Rex Road, and he said that, hey, the owners' meetings is where this stuff starts to get done because that's where one owner kind of starts to level with another owner. Don't think there aren't some of these deals that get done behind closed doors that, hey, you make me this deal and I'll remember it when it comes time to voting for the Super Bowl at your stadium. Those kind of things. But here's what I fear. I don't fear the traded pick for Cam Ward. I actually want that to happen because while I think there's something there with Cam Ward, I'm not sold Cam Ward's a franchise quarterback. And by the way, nobody else is either unless it's the people that want to talk themselves into the right here, right now. But I'm starting to feel that there is fear that there is a chance that Will Levis ends up as the starting quarterback of the Tennessee Titans this coming season. They don't want to take Cam Ward at number 1. Because if they take Cam Ward at number 1, they don't get any future picks. They want picks. Pick. Draft, develop, retain. They want picks. That's why they're not ruling it out, because they do hope that somebody knocks their socks off. Now, they'll take Cam Ward if there's not a good enough offer, but I don't get the sense that they want to take Cam Ward. Last year, the Bears made it obvious when they traded Justin Fields for a bag of footballs, they were taking Caleb Williams. Adam Peters, the general manager of the Commanders, said, quote, "We feel good about staying at number 2. I don't see a whole lot of scenarios where we trade down, to be honest with you. We feel great about staying there." Don't think we're going to trade the pick. It's not going to happen. That's what Chicago told you. That's what Washington told you. And we've seen the negotiation between New England and the Giants last year where New England said, yeah, it'd have to be pretty historic to get us to move off of it. The Titans have never said it would take something historic to get them to move off of Cam Ward. In fact, PK came back from the combine and he said, hey, if you're the Giants and you want to get up to number 1, drop your first rounder next year and deal's done. Which again brings me back to Levis. The Titans keep telling everyone they are open for a trade. But I think a lot of us assume that they're not going to get what they want. Everybody keeps thinking that, Carolina traded all these picks in order to move up to number 1. And so that's what's going to happen here. But the truth is, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud were graded as higher prospects. In fact, so was Anthony Richardson. And I'd love to know what Will Levis's grade was compared to Cam Ward's when they were coming out. But, all those guys were graded ahead of where Ward is now. You're not going to get the same thing in return. Thomas Dimitrov, the former Falcons general manager, came on our show at the Super Bowl and said that. So they keep telling everyone they're open for a trade. Most of us assume they're not going to get what it would require for them to move off of it, so they'll just take Cam Ward. And that is probably what happens. But what if they get what they're actually looking for? What if the Saints at 9 sit back in the room? Again, they sent everybody to Miami's Pro Day last week. What if the Saints at 9 sit back and say, hey, we've got Derek Carr for another year, but we can develop Cam, take it on the chin next year as we reset the cap, because that's, again, how you do it. You spend 1 year where you're terrible, and then all of a sudden all that goes away. And the Saints probably wouldn't even have to do that. But we sit Cam on the bench, but eventually Cam becomes our guy. We transition from Carr to Cam. Let's make the trade. And Gail Benson, the owner, says, go for it. Go make that Carolina trade. And the Carolina trade was basically 3 1s and 2 2s. Now, again, I don't think that New Orleans would make that trade, but let's say it's something like that. Now, who's your quarterback? You just traded back to 9. Who's your quarterback? Shedeur Sanders is off the board, so that's not an option. They're not going to take a guy in the 4th round. They're not going to take Dylan Gabriel. They're not going to take Will Howard. They're not going to take Kyle McCord in the 4th round and say, all right, son, you're our quarterback. So it all goes back to Levis. And I keep wondering, why are they so adamant to make sure that everybody knew we have not been calling on Will Levis? We want to give Will Levis the opportunity to compete. That is what Chad Brinker said. Sat down with Jim Wyatt, again, the state-run channel, and he said, we have not taken any calls on Will Levis, and we haven't called anybody on Will Levis. And he wants Jim Wyatt to put that out there. He is Jim Wyatt's boss, I do believe. So why? Why did he want that out there? I think it has to be one of 2 reasons. One, because they think it would affect his trade value one way or another, which, again, no matter what, I don't think isn't much. But they think, oh, yeah, if we tell people we're interested in dealing Levis, then that would affect his trade value. Again, I think his trade value is to a team that has a veteran starting quarterback that needs a backup quarterback, and there's some sort of pick swap in there where really the team that ends up getting Levis has him as a young backup that maybe we can develop and we pay $0 to. That's really what this is. So that would be the first reason. And again, I don't think Chad Brinker coming out and saying nothing about Will Levis would affect his trade value. So I don't think that's it. And the second reason that, again, they want it out there is to show Levis some support in case they need him. Now, only morons, in my opinion, would bring Will Levis back in any capacity after that disastrous season he had last year. And after every single person associated with drafting him, except for Teflon Chad, apparently, has been fired. But what have the Titans proven time and time again? Again, as I said, only morons would bring Will Levis back in any capacity. Backup quarterback, third string quarterback, starting quarterback. But what have the Titans told us over the last couple of years? So the more I think about it, the more I'm sitting back here saying, oh my God, this is their plan B. Think about it. The Browns, we know they need a quarterback. The owner came out yesterday and said, we swung and missed on Deshaun. They're done with him. They're going to have to pay him, but they're done with him. Well, what's their plan B if they don't go Shedeur Sanders at quarterback and Cam Ward's off the board? It's Kenny Pickett. We see with the Giants, Jameis Winston, Russell Wilson. If you don't get a quarterback, what's your plan B? We know what it is. You got Brandon Allen. So, again, the Titans have told everybody they want to trade the pick. Now, they're not going to give it away, but they want to trade it. Most of us think they're not going to be able to trade it for what it would typically go for because the player they're going to take is not as good as the player who is typically in that spot in a traditional draft. But if they get their wish, I think that might mean that we have to watch Will Levis play quarterback again. And I have guaranteed that Levis would not be on the team next year, that Levis would not be the quarterback next year. Because, again, only morons bench a young quarterback in favor of Mason Rudolph and then turn to him the next season. But as I said, what have the Titans told us lately about themselves? 615-737-1025. That is our phone number. That's how we're starting today. Again, I'm starting to have a little fear that Will Levis might be the starting quarterback if the Titans get what they want. And there's one thing about this offseason that I really have to ding the Titans for. I didn't do it necessarily at the time because I figured they were for sure taking Cam Ward, and it seems like as of right now, that's kind of they're trying not to, which is surprising. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025, off and rolling today. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 to the game.
Whew, Tennessee Titans. Hey, could they be maneuvering, put themselves in a position to get their quarterback next year? Think about that. Are you ready? I don't like to use the word tanking, Todd. You know me. I don't even.
Don't do
Is
it,
a team?
Solly. Don't do it.
I mean, is a team ready to say we don't like either one of these guys with the first overall pick? If we could move down and get one of these guys, fine. But with the first, let's move out of that. Let's not do that. Let's just keep getting the team better. What team do you know is willing to wait a whole year to hope you find a quarterback next year? That's what tanking's all about, right? Throwing away a season with the hope of getting into next year's draft to hope you're in a position to get a kid who's going to come in and help you.
There you go. That was Solomon Wilcots. And Solly's like, if they don't take Cam Ward, I mean, I don't want to say they're tanking, but, and again, the Titans keep on telling everybody that will listen that there is a chance they could trade the pick. They keep telling you that. Whether it's Brinker's sit down with Jim Wyatt, whether it's every time Ian Rappaport opens his mouth saying it's tracking that they're going to take Ward, but whether it's Adam Schefter talking about how the expectation is close to the draft, you'll see the Browns or the Giants make a play for that pick, whether it's the fact that Mike Borgonzi was sipping coffee with the Giants general manager today, according to the New York Daily News, at the Breakers Hotel where the owners' meetings are being held in Palm Beach. And the more and more I think about it, this kind of reminds me last year when the Titans on the first day of free agency signed an $8 million running back and not a right tackle. When they signed Tony Pollard, I was fine with it. Tony Pollard's a good player. But after free agency was over, I was incredibly disappointed that they didn't add a right tackle. And I was like, what are they doing here? Well, Jared, we can't fix everything in one offseason. A lot of you boo-hoo Titan Blue told me. And I'm like, well, let's fix right tackle before you spend $8 million on a running back, especially after you just drafted a running back in the third round last year. That doesn't make any sense. So the more I thought about it today, the more I can't get over the fact that the Titans entered free agency and made no attempt to sign a real bridge quarterback, like a true bridge, the guy that could start if he has to. Now, many of you are going to say, I know, Jared, you wanted Sam Darnold, but I'm not talking about Sam Darnold here. I'm just talking about anybody who's actually started before in the NFL and is better than Will Levis. Doesn't have to be Daniel Jones, but he's on the list. Daniel Jones, Jameis Winston, Drew Lock, Mac Jones, Carson Wentz, Gardner Minshew, Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota, Ryan Tannehill. Again, all these guys. That's before you get to the old pawpaws, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and they've had no interest in either of them either. Somebody that gives you an option if you have to have it. And so I would say this. If they were for sure going to take Cam Ward, the same way that Chicago was for sure going to take Caleb Williams, the same way that Washington was for sure going to take Jaden Daniels, then fine, Brandon Allen's the guy you want to bring in. Brandon Allen has a couple of snaps under his belt, so he doesn't need any practice reps during the week. Brandon Allen has been the backup quarterback to a first overall pick, Joe Burrow. So he knows Brian Callahan, and Brian Callahan knows him, and he knows what's expected of him as the backup to the number one pick, and all of that fits and makes sense, and he's cheap, which, of course, is important to the Titans. But that only makes sense if you're for sure taking Cam Ward. And at the time, I kept saying they're for sure going to take Cam Ward. When Sam Darnold signed in Seattle, I guaranteed it on the air that they were going to take Cam Ward number one overall because, again, that's what a normal, smart, regular team that's going quarterback number one and they're not interested in trading the pick, that's what they do. But what's happened since then, with all of us saying, okay, well, they're going to draft Cam Ward now, all they've done is said, we're not for sure yet. We're not sure. We just want you to know that. We're not sure. If somebody knocks our socks off, we'll have to think about it. We're not sure. That's not what Washington said last year. That's not what Chicago said last year. My guess is they view Will Levis as that guy. Like in Cleveland right now, I have no idea who the quarterback's going to be. There's a lot of chatter about Kirk Cousins. Now, when I did the quarterback boards, I'm going to tell you, Kirk Cousins had a terrible season last year. In fact, you can argue that Kirk Cousins might have had a worse season than Will Levis. I think the turnover-worthy play percentage, Will Levis was number 2 in the NFL, which means the percentage of his plays that were worthy of a turnover, according to PFF, were the second worst in the league. Kirk Cousins was number 1. But it looks like Cleveland would be a fit for Kirk Cousins if Atlanta and Cleveland can work out the money and everything else. But if that doesn't happen, Cleveland can play Kenny Pickett at quarterback. Fine for them. If they take Cam Ward, if they take Shedeur Sanders, and they want to play him, that's fine. Kenny can sit the bench. He sat the bench last year in Philadelphia. That's not a big deal. We obviously know about Jameis Winston. If Jameis Winston has to start, even though Jameis Winston sucks, if Jameis Winston has to start, Jameis Winston can start. If Russell Wilson has to start, he quarterbacked the team to the playoffs last year. He can start. My guess is they view Will Levis as that guy. That Brinker and Borgonzi, and again, I don't think they include Callahan in the discussions, but maybe they did. That they've said, you know what? If we have to, we can play Will Levis at quarterback. And I think that is a horrendous idea. And I will tell you why. Because Will Levis is hated by the fans. I already saw somebody in the YouTube chat say, if Levis is the quarterback next year, then we riot. And I understand the sentiment. I mean, Don Jarrett joked yesterday about the idea, why do I have to watch a Will Levis play quarterback? What have I done? Turn such disrespect. So Will Levis is absolutely hated by the fans. I think the way they pumped him up last year, where they did every podcast imaginable and took their pants off to talk about Will Levis, and Amy told the fans, get excited about this young quarterback we have, and all of that, I think that really did a disservice. I think it did a disservice to Levis, and I think it did a disservice to the fans' relationship with Will Levis. Because the fans, and I said this when he came out with his Mayo cologne, and everyone said, oh, Jared, it's okay. It's just a joke. And I said, why make fun of yourself? Why set yourself up to be the butt of a joke? I said, when Will Levis came out with that mayonnaise commercial or with the mayonnaise perfume, I said, I know, the Twitter bros think it's cool. And it's like, yeah, ha, 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 ha. But as a parent, which I wasn't at the time, but as a parent, I have this feeling of, are you really sure you want to put yourself out there to get yourself set up to be made fun of? And the fan base, I believe, after October, when everyone realized that Levis was garbage, every time they saw one of those Mayo commercials, they made them more mad at Levis. And here's the problem with that. Will Levis is too online. Will Levis cares too much what people think, that I don't think he'd ever be able to overcome that. So the Titans could make a big trade with the Giants or with somebody else. Well, let's say they make a big trade with the Saints and they take Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, with the 9th overall pick. Tyler Warren is a very good player and they need a tight end, and he's the kind of guy they could go out and get. Well, we could look at it and say, well, they've got 2 first-rounders now, and they've got 2 second-rounders out of this, but we're not going to enjoy that if we had to watch Will Levis play quarterback. Whereas if we were watching Gardner Minshew play quarterback, we could at least sit there and say, this isn't the end of the world. They won 8 games. They won 7 games. They were competitive in these games. We could talk about the games that week. There's no way the fans are going to be able to do that with Will Levis. And there is a tiny, 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 tiny chance that Will Levis is actually a good quarterback, and the Titans, by not having a right tackle and having a right tackle play left tackle and drafting a guard in the first round who sucks and not having good enough receivers, that NWI ends up being the touchdown champion around here and getting rid of Derrick Henry, all the things the Titans did to screw themselves last year. that it's not totally Levis's fault. The problem is, if he's going to discover that, he needs to sit on the bench and play in the preseason and watch somebody who knows how to do it. And the only option for him to play right here would be if the Titans are tanking for next season. So this isn't going to work out. So again, now that I look at the Brandon Allen thing, I'm fine with it if you're for sure taking Cam Ward. But all the Titans keep telling everybody is, we're not for sure taking Cam Ward. Well, now I've got a problem. There were all these guys you could have got. You could have gone and got Daniel Jones. They give Daniel Jones $14 million. Trade Levis somewhere. Who cares? Bag of balls. And if you don't draft the quarterback, then Daniel Jones is your starter. Fine. But Daniel Jones gives you a much better chance to win than Levis does next year. So I have to ding them on the Brandon Allen thing right now. 615-737-1025. I'll get to some of your phones. 615-737-1025. Plus, Rich Ganon has a scouting report on Cam Ward. And the one thing he says at the end is, I think, rather concerning. Big picture. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025 here on an abbreviated edition of Stillman and Company with the Preds playing at 6 o'clock. Again, the animated game on News Channel 5, so just tune in that. Tune into 94.9 The Fan today as the Sounds take on Gwinnett. The pregame show starts this hour at 2:50 and first pitch is at 3:05. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. And then later today on 94.9 The Fan, tune in for Vandy Baseball as the Commodores take on Western Kentucky. Pregame will start at 5:45 and first pitch is at 6. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com.
Why are you holding that pick so close to the vest? Like, the jig is up. You're picking number 1 overall.
Well, I think you want to go through the entire process. Like I said from the beginning, that I wanted to go through the entire thing, go through the quarterbacks and everybody that's on the board, go through the workouts, the combines, the private workouts that we have set up. I think that's the right thing to do, is to do your due diligence and go through the whole process before you actually come to that decision.
Are you pretty sure you know who you're taking?
You know, I think we're getting closer to that decision right now. We have a few more boxes to check here over the next couple of weeks, but we're getting close.
We're getting close. Hey, we want to go through the process. We want to go through it. We want to make their decisions. We want to go through the process. We got to respect the process. Sure. Washington, again, they knew this time last year, they knew that they were taking Jaden Daniels. But you don't know? Sounds like the guy that's dated the girl for 7 years, and she's like, when am I getting a ring? And he's like, we got to figure things out. Like, you've been together for 7 years. You're 35 years old. At some point, let's go. And that's what Kay Adams was kind of getting at there in that cut. So everybody and their grandma thinks the Titans are going to take Cam Ward, including me, even though the Titans keep angling for a trade one way or another. So Rich Ganon was on SiriusXM NFL radio, and he was asked to assess Cam Ward, and he gives a full breakdown. This is about, Frazier, how long would you say this is? About 1:30 of a breakdown from Rich Ganon?
Yeah, it's fair.
Okay. I think the very end is really important. Here's what Rich Ganon had to say.
I look at Cam Ward, and one of the things I like about him is he's played a lot of football, right? And in a couple different places. He's spent 2 years at Incarnate Word, kind of the old FBS, or I should say FCS, football championship subdivision. That's the old 1AA. Played a couple years at Washington State, did some good things there. Went back and watched some cut-ups of him at Washington State. The year at Miami, was a first-team All-American, won the Davey O'Brien Award as the nation's top quarterback, was a finalist for the Heisman Trophy. I think he's got a lot of those qualities and intangibles that you like at that position. Good size and arm, can make all the throws. I think when he sees it and he's in rhythm, he's very effective and accurate from the pocket. I think he needs better eye discipline and footwork to develop into a true pocket passer, but he's got the ability to move the sticks with his legs when he has to. I think he's much more of a pocket passer than a dual threat quarterback, but he's got some suddenness when you watch his release and his anticipation, especially when he knows where to go with the ball, whether it's a quick game or he throws that seam route really well. When you break down the Hurricanes tape last year, I talked about, like all these quarterbacks coming out in this draft class, they need to be better situationally. We talk about third down, talk about red zone, talk about 2 minute. I think when you study Cam Ward's cutouts from last year, that red zone tape was a bit disappointing for me. I think he completed just 39% of his red zone throws per Pro Football Focus. But overall, he's got plenty of talent and physical skills, I think, to develop into an NFL starting quarterback. I think he's going to go to the Tennessee Titans, and he's going to probably play before he's ready, and we'll see how it works out.
Oh, okay. So I thought that was a very thorough analysis from Rich Ganon, and he says, overall, I think he's got talent. I think he's got a chance. I think the Titans are going to take him, and I think he's going to play before he's ready. Oh, crap. Oh, no. Because just think about this again. Let's say Rich Ganon is right. And Rich Ganon is a former league MVP at quarterback. Now, I am always skeptical of players' opinions, but the one thing that Floyd used to tell me about former players is the one thing they know is what they do. And Rich Ganon played quarterback at a very high level in the National Football League. And so Rich Ganon says, I don't think he's ready, but I think Tennessee's going to stick him out there before he's ready. Uh-oh. Because could you imagine the Titans taking Cam Ward with the first pick and going down to the media in the press room and saying, hey, fans, we drafted Cam Ward out of Miami, and we now live in an era where everybody plays right away, but Cam Ward isn't ready, so go enjoy Brandon Allen this year. The fans are not going to like that. The owner is not going to like that. And I also can't get over the little nugget in the Jim Wyatt story over the weekend where Brian Callahan talked about how great Brandon Allen is, and they asked about Mason Rudolph, And apparently Callahan said that Mason Rudolph chose Pittsburgh because he thinks he has a better shot of playing in Pittsburgh than he does playing here. And I'm like, what? A better shot to play in Pittsburgh? They're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. Their owner today said they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. Everybody knows they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers. So he decided he wanted to go to Pittsburgh where Aaron Rodgers is going to play quarterback. Aaron Rodgers does not miss games unless he has a debilitating injury, a torn Achilles, a broken collarbone. That's it. When I did the quarterback boards, I was actually impressed with Aaron's season last year with the Jets. No matter how bad the Jets made it look, Aaron actually had a semi-decent season for the Jets. And I say that because I noticed, Aaron played one game in 2023. But outside of that, Aaron's pretty much a 17-game-a-year guy. Mason Rudolph's not going to play in Pittsburgh. What are we talking about? So the Titans cannot go to the podium on draft night and say Brandon Allen is going to be the starting quarterback. But Rich Gannon is telling you that's what they need to do, that he may not be ready to play in the NFL right away. What do you think happens when you play a quarterback before he's ready to play? Don't you think some of these teams screw these quarterbacks up more than these quarterbacks are just bad? You ever thought about that? Do you remember in Jordan Love's second season, Aaron Rodgers lied about getting vaccinated? I guess that's the one time that he wasn't a 17-game-a-year guy. Aaron Rodgers lied about being vaccinated and had to miss a game against Kansas City, and Jordan Love had to play. That Jordan Love looked like he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. Jordan Love's a $55 million quarterback now. Why? Because they developed him. And Brinker knows that because Brinker was there. And Borgonzi knows that because Borgonzi was in Kansas City when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. But you can't sell to the fans that you're going to play Brandon Allen. So that's another thing that I'm very concerned about. Phone lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. One texter says, I cannot disagree with the Levis take, but then again, we made Malik Willis look great for Green Bay. So what if there's actually something there with Levis? Again, if there's something there with Levis, it'd probably be discovered by not being the starting quarterback. Whether it is he's the backup quarterback or the third string quarterback here, and then next year gets in there, like that could be something. He goes somewhere else with a different coach who's able to connect with him or watches a veteran do it and goes from there. The idea of Levis actually secretly being a good quarterback and Brian Callahan and this Titan team with this fan base being the ones to get it out of him, I think it seems pretty far-fetched. Like I'd put the percent chances of that being possible at 5%. So I hear what you're saying. And Malik did look better for the Titans in training camp, by the way, this past year. I think Callahan was asked about it, was asked if he knew that Malik was going to be this good this past year, would he have made the trade? And he kind of danced that part. Joey from Bellevue says, I worry about his red zone efficiency. He mentioned his completion percentage was low. I'll say this. So Cam talked about this in the SiriusXM interview he did at the Combine, and he said the reason that he missed in the end zone was if I miss high in the end zone, it's incomplete. If I miss short in the end zone, it's intercepted. And I think there's at least something to that. One texter says, I would love to draft Cam and start Brandon Allen or Levis all season. Well, if you start Levis in the second game, the fans are going to demand that you put Cam Ward in there. Brandon Allen, again, he's never started consistently. I highly doubt Brandon Allen could give you the kind of season where as a fan base, everybody could say, okay, that's fine. Like Daniel Jones could do that. Like you could say Daniel Jones is our quarterback, and you go out there with Daniel Jones with Cam Ward on the bench, and you start off 3-3, and the head coach comes out and says, we're staying with Daniel, and the fans say, okay. I can't see that happening with Brandon Allen because I just can't see Brandon Allen going 3-3. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number. More your phones at 615-737-1025. Plus, it is baseball season, and Rob Manfred has talked about expansion and the cities perhaps involved. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Those are my guys. Hiller takes great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you whenever you need them. And nobody wants to deal with a plumbing, HVAC, or electrical emergency. Nobody. Most of the time, you don't know what it'll cost, if it'll get fixed correctly, or if someone is just trying to sell you something that you don't need. Well, guess what? With Hiller, when you call their experts, they're going to solve your problems quickly. And again, I attest to that because I use Hiller. The price you're told is the price that you're actually going to pay, with no hidden fees or surprises on your bill. So book online right now by visiting happyhiller.com. That's happyhiller.com. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. Proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. Those are my guys. Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today.
Is it fair to say that by the time you do, let's say 29 is the date, that we will have 2 new expansion teams in baseball?
Yeah, what I've said about that, I'd like to have them picked. They may not be playing, but I'd like to have them picked.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so picked and playing are two different things.
Well, yeah, because you know, it's kind of what we were just talking about. It takes a couple of years at least to build a stadium, and you know, there may be cities where you need to build a facility, and we would probably wait. You don't want an expansion club to go into a temporary facility. You want them to go into the market with the stadium built, make the big splash,
Right.
get that great season ticket base going, and take off.
Do you feel confident that could happen?
Oh, I do. I think there's markets that
We know who they are, Sacramento and
I'm not
Salt
gonna,
Lake and all that.
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on who the candidates are. I will tell you, literally, one of the things that is difficult to do is we have enough people that are serious contenders for expansion franchises that you kind of got to manage them, you know, so they don't get ahead of you.
That was Rob Manfred on Mad Dog Sports Radio on Sirius XM saying, we want expansion here at some point. We got to get the Tampa deal done. The A's are moving to Vegas, but we got to get that done. And then we want expansion. And there are so many cities that want teams that we have to tell them, hold your horses. Hold your horses. Now, here's what I think's hilarious about that. Manfred wants Nashville. Major League Baseball wants Nashville. I'm telling you that right now. The only thing I will say for certain, though, is that they will lose their best bargaining chip for these other places getting stadiums if Nashville's off the table. But Manfred wants expansion before he leaves. And he wants the Tampa Stadium deal done, and that's a nightmare, too. So with baseball season starting and Manfred talking about expansion, and again, Nashville is a city that even he has thrown out in the past. I'm keeping my eyes on a couple nuggets as we start the baseball season. Number one, this year, both the A's and the Rays are playing in minor league stadiums. The A's, because their stadium is getting built in Vegas, or will eventually be built in Vegas, and the Rays, because the hurricane blew the roof off their stadium. Steinbrenner Field, where the Rays are playing, has a capacity of 11,000 people. First Horizon Park, according to a Google search I did, has a capacity of 10,000. And while I'm sure they can't expand it to 30,000, which is probably what they would need, I bet they can probably expand it somewhere in the ballpark of 14, 15,000. Find a way. So let's keep our eye on that. But it would not surprise me if MLB, as they look to end the local blackouts with the streaming and everything else, and they make their money from TV anyways, if baseball were to start building smaller parks. And if baseball were to start building smaller parks where they're looking at more 20, 25,000, maybe because of downtown Nashville, which Major League Baseball desperately wants, maybe that could make a little expansion at First Horizon Park a possibility. Number two, Manfred has said forever that he wanted to get stadium deals for Oakland and Tampa before moving to expansion. Now, I have said forever, when it comes to baseball, I personally want the Rays to relocate to Nashville. I was on the radio in Louisville when the First Horizon Park deal got done, but I was, as a fan, against it. Because at the time, David Price was the star player on the Rays, and I was like, I could see the Rays not being able to get a deal done in Tampa, moving to Nashville, and opening up a brand new facility with David Price starting that first game. Not that that would have really mattered, but that's kind of the pitch that they could have put out there. And I remember when they got that deal done, when Mayor Carl Dean got the deal done, I was like, well, there goes any shot of getting a major league stadium in Nashville. They're not going to build two stadiums. And I'll tell you right now, I talked to somebody the other day on the Metro Council. They're not building a baseball stadium. Manfred cannot get a deal done. When it comes to Oakland, that deal, he couldn't get it. That deal's over. No matter how many times he vowed he'd try. Tampa, it seemed, had a deal in place before the hurricane. The hurricane came, and now the city is telling the team to go F themselves. So what makes us think that they'll be able to get a deal done? So if Tampa can't get a deal done, again, Manfred wants to get a deal done, but he wanted to get a deal done for Oakland and eventually just moved him to Las Vegas, which has been kind of the rumor all along. Las Vegas in the West was what Nashville is in the East. And then finally, I keep saying this, but you have two options, both Major League Baseball and Nashville fans. And I desperately want a baseball team, desperately want us to get one. But there are two options. The first option is to build the park outside of Davidson County. So think of Murfreesboro or Smyrna and call it the Nashville team and build a huge entertainment complex with restaurants and condos and hotels. And it's really simple. You can just go get a bunch of these Broadway bars and you have a Alan Jackson's and a Jason Aldean's and a Lainey Wilson's and line up all these bars and restaurants. And now you've got your own ballpark village out there in Murfreesboro. People will say, well, I don't want to drive to Murfreesboro every day to go to a game. First of all, it's 30 minutes. A lot of people work downtown and drive to Murfreesboro every day. Secondly, you're not going to go every game. But the Yankees are coming to town, and they're 2 games back of first place. Don't you want to go watch? So that's the first thing. It can't be Davidson County. It won't be Davidson County. The other option, and I don't think Major League Baseball would go for this, the other option is to play at First Horizon Park and do all you can do to put as many possible seats in there. Maybe you can get it from 10,000 to 13,500. I don't think that would be enough. The Rays last year averaged 16.5, and I heard Manfred in that same interview tell Mad Dog, like, hey, I don't want to go on record and say that Sacramento can't host any playoff games if the A's were to make the playoffs. But Manfred said, I don't think I could play a World Series game there where there's 12,000 seats. He said maybe a wild card round, but he can't play a World Series where there's 12,000 seats. So if that's the case, First Horizon Park's probably out. And I think we've got to look back. And again, I wasn't on the radio when all this was going down. I started a week after First Horizon Park opened. But let me say this. I think it is inconceivable that they did not make the Sounds agree when they built First Horizon Park, that they did not make the Sounds agree to build a stadium that was big enough for a potential major league expansion. I think it is a travesty that they didn't do that. But Manfred says he wants expansion before he retires, and they keep saying they want expansion in Nashville. Manfred wants the Rays Stadium deal done, but it's so toxic there, I just don't see it. The Rays have to go play somewhere. So if there's going to be 2 new expansion teams, plus the Rays are probably going to move out of Tampa, no matter how hard Manfred tries to keep them there, I'd say there's a shot. Major League Baseball has said, now they haven't said it on record, but they've said it off the record. They've said it behind the scenes. If you can get us a stadium downtown, we're in. But you can't do that. Nobody's doing that. Here's one thing about the Rays, though. If somebody buys the Rays, they're not going to want to buy a stadium. If somebody pays $5 billion for the Rays, they're not going to want to then turn around and build a $2 billion stadium. But the expansion fee is $2 billion, or it's rumored to be $2 billion. So maybe somebody could pay $2 billion to buy a team and then another $2 billion to buy the stadium. And that's how Major League Baseball and the city of Nashville can get their cake and eat it too. 615-737-1025 is the phone number if you want to weigh in. 615-737-1025 here on the program. There is one major newsworthy item as far as the Titans are concerned at the owners' meetings. We're not going to be distracted by the tush push today. And we'll get to that next. Stillman & Company, 102.5-1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there, while I have your attention after talking about the great, and I mean great, but those great, the possibility of us having baseball. Let me tell everyone it's time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament. Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce that we will be back at the Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th. They're trying to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios, and presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. So the owners' meetings are going on, and the whole tush-push argument, that was a big story, and they're getting rid of the chain gang, and that's a big story. You know, the ball's going to now be measured electronically, which about freaking time. It's like when we got replay in Major League Baseball. Again, about freaking time. But that stuff doesn't really move the needle for me as far as kind of the news is concerned affecting what I care about. So the story that I think matters, and I can already hear a bunch of you telling me, oh, Jared, this is nothing. But it's not nothing because this is the NFL and everything is something. So Pat Leonard, who's covered the Giants for a long, long time, for the New York Daily News, tweeted out 7 hours ago. So what would that be, Frazier? 7 hours ago would be 8 a.m. At 7:54 a.m. this morning, which would be 8:54, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in Palm Beach. Giants general manager Joe Schoen and Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi were just out in the open here at the Breakers, which is the hotel where this is all being held, here at the Breakers alone having coffee and chatting for a bit. The Titans are picking number 1 in the NFL draft. The Giants are picking number 3. Now, we all know that a first date is usually coffee if it's in the middle of the day, the beginning of the day, or a drink if it's at night. Sometimes you might start with dinner on the first date, but usually for me, isn't it traditionally, oh yeah, you want to go grab a drink? You want to go grab coffee? So Mike Borgonzi and Joe Schoen had coffee this morning at the Breakers Hotel in front of everybody. Guys, that's not an accident, and that's not about nothing. It may result in nothing, but the two of them having a conversation in public for everyone to see, and knowing that everyone would see it, and knowing that everyone would report it, or at least somebody would report it, it means something. What is that something? I don't know. I can only speculate, but I can tell you right now, it's not nothing. The owners' meetings, as Charles Robinson said last week, that's where a lot of this stuff gets done. So Joe Schoen, who holds the 3rd overall pick, and we know the Giants are desperate. And they're not just desperate for a quarterback, but they are desperate for a young quarterback that they believe can be their franchise guy. They've been looking for a young franchise quarterback since 2022. They declined Daniel Jones' 5th-year option going into that season. A sign that they were probably going to move off of Daniel Jones and move on to their own young guy. The problem is in 2022, there were no good draft quarterbacks to pick when they had 2 top picks. In 2023, they won too much in 2022 that they couldn't pick somebody. They extended Daniel Jones, and in 2024, they decided not to take J.J. McCarthy or Michael Penix or Bo Nix. So the Giants need a young quarterback. And the other thing, again, I think we know this. The Titans want to trade the first pick. Now, they may not get an offer that's worthy of trading that pick because, again, as everybody has told us, this draft class is not as good as a previous draft class. This draft class is not as good as the typical draft class when it comes to quarterbacks. So maybe the Giants have done their homework on Cam Ward and they say, well, you know, Cam's not what we would have paid for Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, what we would have paid for Drake May or Jaden Daniels. So we're just not going to pay as much. But again, I don't think there's any doubt that the Giants are desperate for a young quarterback and that the Titans want to trade the pick. So when the general manager of the Titans is sitting for coffee with the general manager of the Titans, did I say with the Titans twice? Whatever, the Titans and the Giants. Whenever those two general managers are sitting down together, that's not nothing. And it's also not nothing that they did it out in the open, in public, so that everybody would see it. Do you know how many meetings go on at the owners' meetings that you don't know anything about? Do you know how many meetings at the combine go on that you never hear of? How many meetings at the Super Bowl go down? You know that every owner in the NFL gets tickets and a suite to the Super Bowl, and they share it with another owner. So they take 16 suites, and it's, hey, the Titans and the Seahawks owners go into this suite if they want to go. But this is out in the open in front of everybody. That is something. What is the something? I can only speculate, but I can tell you it's not nothing. And here's another thing that's not nothing. According to the people who cover the New York Giants, at this year's league meetings, the owners' meetings, Giants owner John Mara, who speaks every year, has decided not to speak this year at the owners' meetings. I remember a couple of years ago, and I was in Mexico City during the league meetings, and I was listening to all the talk about what was going, and there was all that talk about flexing Thursday night football, if you remember that, and flexing Monday night football. And John Mara was pissed and held a whole press conference about how, we're not going to do a disservice. We shouldn't do a disservice to our fans. And he talks every year at this thing. This year, John Mara's not talking. Again, I don't know what that means. 9 years out of 10, I wouldn't give a rat's ass that John Mara's not speaking to the media. That's a New York thing. That's not a Nashville thing. But again, given what I think we know, the Titans like Cam Ward, and if they keep the first pick, they'll take Cam Ward, but they would love a haul for that number one pick. And secondly, the Giants are desperate for a quarterback. And third, their owner is not talking to the media for whatever reason. Their owner does not want to speak to the media. I think that's the news of the day that affects all of us, which is the Titans have kept telling you. Brinker sat down with Jim Wyatt and said, we'll know in a couple of weeks. Borgonzi sat down with Kay Adams at the owners' meetings. She said, we'll know in a couple of weeks. Brian Callahan sat down at the breakfast, and he said, we'll know in a couple of weeks. That's the line they keep saying. Why? Because they want to see who's interested. The touch points, as far as Cam Ward is concerned, it's over. Brian Callahan even said that yesterday. We can Zoom with him a couple more times. They've already had him in for a 30 visit. They met with him at the combine. They went to his pro day. They've had a private workout. If they weren't interested in talking about the pick, they probably wouldn't be sitting down for coffee in front of everyone. I know, Jared. By the way, Joe Shane came out at the owners' meetings and he said, well, we got Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, so we don't have to take a quarterback. Sure. 615-737-1025, which is the phone number, 615-737-1025. I don't think a deal gets done between the Titans and the Giants. I just don't. I think what is going to happen is Cam Ward's going to be the number one pick to the Titans. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't. And I'll explain why. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025 here on our program. This week's Nashville's best deal is for Bad Axe Throwing Nashville, downtown's largest axe throwing venue and your go-to spot for food, fun, and vibes. Enjoy panoramic views of the city, a killer soundtrack, craft cocktails from the full bar, and a Northwoods-inspired menu with a Southern twist. This week, score half off a $50 gift card while supplies last. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals now and grab yours today.
There's still a question as to what the Giants are going to do with the third overall pick in the draft. Joe Shane, the GM, discussed it yesterday. They're trying to be vague, and that's fine. You want to keep your options open. You don't want to lock into any one course. You don't want to tip your hand. You don't want somebody to know who you want at 3, and then they're going to be the one who jumps up to number 2 with the Browns to get your guy. And you always want to be able to say at the end of the day, we got the guy we wanted. So if you never pigeonhole yourself in any one direction, you can always say, we got the guy we wanted at number 3. We got the guy at number 3 that we would have taken if we had the first overall pick in the draft. Even if it's not true, you can at least say it plausibly. So they're keeping their options open. They say they can go in any direction with any position at the number 3 overall pick. And a lot of it depends upon what the Browns do at number 2. Obviously, do they trade it? Do they use it? Where do they go from there? And how does it play out? We'll see.
Yeah, they're another team. I think there's some similarities to the situation we just talked about, right? Is there one guy there that we necessarily just go, oh, it changes everything? If maybe Cam Ward is there, if they can get their hands on him, or if they can trade up and acquire him that way, that's awesome. That's the guy. But back to the same conversation we had a little bit with Cleveland, and that there are definitely more holes to fill on that Giants roster. And what do you want to do?
There you go. That was Florio and Sims talking about what are the Giants going to do. And let me say this. 9 times out of 10, I do not care what the New York Giants are doing, thinking. I think they're kind of a waste of space. Yes, they play in New York. Yes, they have a proud history, and they have won some Super Bowls, even relatively recently, not 2 or 3 years ago, but still before a lot of other franchises have. And yet, I just have to make this comment. That is, if I were the Giants, I'd make the trade with the Titans. Like, if I were the Giants, I would, deep down inside, I would know we're going to have to trade next year's first rounder, and I would ultimately be willing to do it. If I were the Giants, would want to do 3, 34, 99. They have 65 in the third round, so I would offer 99 in the third round. 3, 34, 99, and next year's second to see if that would be enough to get the Titans to move up. Again, that's a first rounder, 2 seconds, and a third. My guess is the Titans would say no. If I were the Giants, ultimately, I'd be willing to send number 3 and next year's first rounder to get it done. Why? Because unlike the Titans, Teflon Chad, who apparently has no responsibility for what happened the 2 years he was here as an assistant general manager, or 1 year as assistant general manager, 1 year as president of football operate, whatever. Teflon Chad and Mike Borgonzi are being treated as if they are just brand spanking new. They're not on the hot seat. The Giants are. Joe Shane and Brian Dable, specifically Joe Shane, they're out of options and they're out of time. And if I'm the Giants, that means I've got to dial up the Hail Mary. The Giants have to show progress. And the way you show progress in the NFL is to have a plan in place at quarterback, especially because in their situation, winning games and maybe even making the playoffs with Russell Wilson as the quarterback is not going to count as progress. Why? Because they already made the playoffs with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and that didn't mean anything tangible for the Giants. They have to justify their employment. They have to justify their existence, and they need a future quarterback in place. Now, I'm going to be fair here. They've had some bad luck. I believe Shane and Dable both came from Buffalo, got the job with the idea that they were going to do what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott did, which was they went through year 1 with Tyrod Taylor at quarterback. Year 2 went to Josh Allen, brought Josh Allen along, and bam, franchise quarterback. They thought they'd come in and they'd let Daniel Jones stink, and then they'd pick Bryce Young or they'd pick C.J. Stroud, but then they made the playoffs. Then they gave Daniel Jones the contract. They got 2 into the negotiation where they offered a deal to Jones that was below market value for a starting quarterback, and they offered a deal to Barkley, which was at the top of the running back market, and they figured whoever takes the deal first gets the deal, whoever doesn't gets tagged. Well, Jones took the deal. Then they tagged Barkley. Then they let Barkley play on the tag. Barkley got hurt. Jones got hurt. Then they let Barkley go off as a free agent. Well, that was a mistake. Then they passed last year on McCarthy, Penix, and Bo Nix. Now, is Malik Neighbors a better player than J.J. McCarthy? We haven't seen J.J. McCarthy play in the NFL yet, but I'd venture to say yes, he's a better player. But he's not a quarterback. Malik Neighbors does you no good if you don't have anybody to throw him the ball. Last year, they were willing to move heaven and earth in order to get Drake May. They sat there at 6 thinking, well, it might not work with Daniel Jones. We've already offered 2 first-round picks to try to move up to 3 to take Drake May. If that's the case, unless you hated McCarthy, you probably should have taken McCarthy. But they didn't. Then they won 3 games this year. Daniel Jones got released in the middle of the season. They were running out Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito, and it was obvious these guys were on the hot seat, and they were probably getting fired. Then somehow they didn't. So they've had the bad luck of, well, they thought they'd come in and lose, then they won, then Daniel Jones got hurt, then Barkley didn't take the deal, then they passed on McCarthy, like, okay, that's some bad luck. Then they kept their jobs. Most general managers would not have kept their jobs in the NFL. So at least they got some good luck. But they knew they were on the hot seat. The owners already said it. They've tried everything. They went for Stafford. Didn't get him. They went for Rodgers. Didn't get him. At some point, you have to go for someone, and you have to get them. Again, their plan was to go for Young or Stroud. Didn't get it. Then their plan was to figure out Jones and Barkley long-term. Didn't work. Then they went after Drake May. Didn't get him. Then they went after Stafford. Didn't get him. Then they went after Rodgers. Didn't get him. Again, at some point, you have to get the guy, and unfortunately for them, they're out of time. They should overpay for Cam Ward. If I were the Titans, I would not want to draft Cam Ward number 1 overall because I don't think Cam Ward's going to be a franchise quarterback. And if I'm using the first overall pick, I need a franchise quarterback. So I would like to trade out, get more picks, and start building the roster. If I were the Giants, I have to take the shot that Cam Ward might be a franchise quarterback, even if I didn't believe that Cam Ward was going to be a franchise quarterback, because at this point, if I'm the Giants, I'm out of options. If the mafia was coming to kill you because you owed them money and you had to pay up or else, wouldn't you do whatever it takes? Would you beg someone you know for money that you wouldn't normally beg? Again, the mob's going to kill you. Don't you think you could get over your pride, dial up the phone and say, hey, I owe the mob 50 grand. I need help. Would you steal? Again, I've never stolen in my life. But would I go knock off a bank, a casino, a jewelry store, something in order to pay the mob back before they kill me? Probably. Again, what are my options? Get caught stealing, go to jail. Don't pay back the mob, die. Desperation makes people do things that they don't necessarily want to do. And in this case, I believe the Giants are absolutely desperate. So while it's their land to farm, not mine, and while I don't care what happens in New York, and I don't care who their quarterback is, I'm just saying, if the Titans are holding out hope that they will get a massive offer when Cam Ward does not seem to be ranked as the type of prospect who you get a massive offer for, I'm saying if the shoe was on the other foot and I were the Giants, I'd do it. Only because a lot of you out there are, whenever somebody says, yeah, Cam Ward is actually ranked lower than all these other quarterbacks that have come out over the last couple of years, with the exception of Kenny Pickett and Michael Penix. But he's lower than Bo Nix. He's lower than McCarthy. He's lower than Anthony Richardson. He's lower than Bryce Young. He's lower than C.J. Stroud. He's lower than Drake May. He's lower than all of them. He's lower than Tua. He's lower than Zach Wilson. He's lower than Trey Lance. He's lower than they're just. Every time I say that, I hear somebody say, but Jared Mahomes, they thought he wasn't any good, and look at Mahomes. Right. You know that's the exception, not the rule. Well, the Giants might need the exception to pan out for them because they don't have any other options at this point. 615-737-1025 to the phones. We'll go to those next. 615-737-1025 here on the program. And I will say this about the Titans. I do think we do know what is going to happen if the Giants don't do that and don't find themselves desperate enough to trade it for Cam Ward. We'll get to that coming up next. 615-737-1025. The Atlanta Braves country road trip is coming to town and teaming up with the Nashville Predators and 1025 The Game. Join us at BetMGM Sports Lounge in Bridgestone Arena on Wednesday, April 16th for a Braves watch party as they take on the Tampa Bay Rays at noon. There will be free giveaways like hats and t-shirts, plus you can win autographed baseballs and free tickets. For more details, visit theGameNashville.com/events.
When you visited with Cam Ward, what's one thing that you learned about him? Not a football-y thing, a human thing.
He's pretty much good at everything he does, from what I hear. Research. He was a good basketball player. He was actually a good golfer, which I recently learned. Good baseball
That seems
player.
very important to you. You're like, oh, here he is. He's going to move up my draft
He's
board
like one of those guys. He's a natural at things he does. So that was interesting to me.
There you go. That was Mike Borgonzi, boy. He's kind of that, like that kind of general manager. He's trying not to say anything. You ask something, and he's like, I know, yeah, he's really good at golf. There's that. Good one, Mikey. All right, let's get to your phone. 615-737-1025. Our phone line is by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Let's go to Anduin, who's up next here on the program. Anduin, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Hi, Jared. Thank you for taking my call. So I have a question to you, and then I have a follow-up question after I hear your response. So your draft scenario trade with the Giants, does that involve the Titans giving the Giants any picks in your trade scenario with them?
I mean, if they did make some massive trade, the Titans would send back a 2026 fourth or a fifth. You know, there's always like a pick that goes back. But in terms of a meaningful pick, no. It would be whatever the Giants would be 3, and then whatever else in exchange for 1.
Okay, so then my follow-up question is, if they're stuck at the second round pick next year and they don't want to go to first, would you throw in like this year's fourth, next year's fourth, like a couple extra fourth or fifths to get that first? And what if the Giants are like, well, we'll do that if we don't have to give you the third this year? Would you still take that deal if you get a first next year and the Giants keep their third?
Okay, so I think you're looking too much into it. Thank you for the call, Anduin. I think you're looking too much into it as far as like the semantics of how it all goes down. You know, again, when the Titans traded with the Rams in 2016, the deal was not just, hey, the Rams trade all these picks and the Titans only give up the first overall pick. The Titans gave up the first pick in 2016, a fourth in 2016, and a sixth in 2016. And then they got all those other picks back, you know, in exchange or whatever, you know, the first rounder, the 2 second rounders, blah, blah, blah. There's always kind of another pick that goes back to kind of balance the scale. So to answer your question, yes, you know, it's not as simple as this all for number 1. The Titans will send back a fourth in next year's draft. You know, it'll be 1 and a 2026 fourth in exchange for 3, 34, 99, and a 2026 second, you know, something like that. So yeah, I mean, if the Mark Dominic's a really smart guy. Now, they didn't win a lot in Tampa when he was the general manager, and I think a lot of that was because they got it wrong at quarterback when they drafted Josh Freeman in the first round. But if you ever listen to Mark Dominic, guy lives in town. He's a very good guy. If you ever listen to Mark Dominic talk, dude knows ball. He is a very, very smart guy. And Mark Dominic said that when he was the general manager in Tampa Bay, they ran a study about top 60 picks. You know, everybody talks about the top 100, which is really the top 3 rounds. But they ran a study that said the top 60 is where you get most of your difference makers. And I mean, let's think about that. A.J. Brown was a top 60 pick. Derrick Henry was a top 60 pick. They weren't first rounders, but they were top 60 picks. Ryan Tannehill was a top 60 pick. Taylor Lewan was a top 60 pick. How many guys have mattered? Let's just use the last Titans Super Bowl window. How many guys did the Titans pick that were not top 60 picks that became just foundationally important players? Byard? Anybody else? You see what I'm saying? Simmons was a top 60 pick. So Mark Dominic sets the line of demarcation at top 60. Chad Brinkers used the top 100, but I kind of believe that 60, 64, you know, like that's kind of the range where there's a serious drop-off year to year in player. So for me, I'm trying to get as many of those picks as possible and as many top 100 picks as possible. So if I'm trading the Seattle 4th, which I believe is like 119 off the top of my head, fine, trade it to them in exchange to get them to give you 34 and their second next year. Those are both top 60 picks. But again, I think you're reading a little too much into it of like, oh, could we, sure, whatever. However it makes you feel. Mike from PA says, if I'm the Giants, I would move whatever it takes to get a quarterback. However, if I'm the Giants owner, I'm not letting the GM move picks outside of this year. So last year, when they talked to John Mara, when Joe Shane talked to John Mara about trading with New England for Drake May, this was all on Hard Knocks. He said, John Mara, the owner, I have to go with my belief, which is if you have a conviction, I have to let you do it. And he talked about Ernie Accorsi, who was the general manager when they pulled off the trade for Eli Manning. And he said, just like 20 years ago, we had a conviction and we went for it. It's kind of Joe Shane's job to sell John Mara on why they've got to pick Cam Ward. I understand, though, if I was the owner of the Giants, I'd be skeptical too. Here's what I'd say, though. This reminds me of 2 years ago when we were talking about Anthony Richardson and C.J. Stroud and Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. And people kept saying, well, do we trust Vrabel and his cronies to be able to develop a quarterback anyway? And I was like, if you own the team and you don't trust the head coach to develop a quarterback in the NFL, then you just need to go ahead and fire the coach. If you do not believe that the coach could develop a quarterback, you need to fire him. Because at some point down the road, you have Tom Brady for 20 years. And at some point, Tom Brady's going to leave, and Bill Belichick has to go find and develop the next quarterback. And if you can't do it, then you're out. So if I were the Giants owner and my general manager were to come to me to say, hey, we got to move up to 1. We've got to deal next year's first or next year's second in order to be able to do it. Don't you almost have to say yes or else fire the guy? Because you clearly don't believe in him if you won't let him deal next year's picks. So I understand the sentiment, but I don't think that's a real way to run a team. Terrell says, a trade from the Giants might include one of the veteran quarterbacks they signed. If so, which quarterback would you take in the trade along with the picks? I would take Jameis, and I don't think you can do that. But I do think, the one thing I will say is I do think that the quarterback musical chairs, as much as I fear the idea that the Titans might actually put Will Levis at quarterback next year, I do think that there will be guys at some point. There's still Tannehill out there. There's still Joe Flacco out there. There's still, a couple of these guys that Kirk Cousins may be available. They say he's not available, but he could be available. Like there can be guys you can take on in the end and it not be the end of the world. One texter says the Titans are going to try to overplay their hand. Go 1-for-1 this year plus next year's one. We are not going to get a haul on this draft. So here's what I would take if I were the Titans. I would take, especially if I didn't want to draft Cam Ward. Like if I don't want to draft Cam Ward, and I don't want to be married to Cam Ward, which at that point, Teflon Chad and Mike Borgonzi are now married to Ward. The only way they get out of this is if they luck out like San Francisco did with Brock Purdy. That's the only way. But I would say if I wanted to move off of the pick, the most important thing for me would be the 3rd overall pick, which is a no-brainer, and 34 or next year's one. I'm trying to get them both right now. And if I were them, I'd be trying to get them both too. But the most important thing for me would be 34 next year's one. Because I think that extra player is incredibly valuable. And next year, that could be your quarterback. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025. More of your phones. Plus, there is a story that we reported 3 weeks ago. We reported it. And the Titans are now kind of getting discovered on this, and they're still not telling the truth about it. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This Saturday, don't miss National Superspeedway's pre-race concert contest. Nashville's next rising star at Dierks Bentley's Whiskey Row from 1 to 5 p.m. The contest will be emceed by 102.5 The Game's Joe Dubin, and special guest DJ Mojo will keep the crowd hyped up all afternoon. For more details, visit thegamenational.com/events. So I was on Twitter today as the league's owners meetings are going on, and I saw a headline from PaulKaharski.com. Taylor Zarzour seems to be closing in on the Titans play-by-play job. That is some breaking news from Paul Kaharski. Breaking news! And I clicked this story, and I looked through the article and see what Paul wrote about Taylor Zarzour. Seems to be emerging as the front runner to replace Mike Keith as the Titans play-by-play man on the radio. Zarzour currently covers major golf tournaments for ESPN Radio and college football and baseball for the network on TV. JP Shadrick is the other top candidate for the Titans job. He works for the Jags on their radio network. And again, this is, Frazier, this seems like some big news, right? The Titans are zeroing in on Taylor Zarzour to be their next play-by-play guy. I mean, that's a nice little nugget right there, right?
Yeah, from the outside looking in.
I mean, except we reported the story 3 weeks ago. In fact, this is what I said on the radio in the 2 o'clock segment on March 13th. Play the cut. A little breaking news, if we shall, as Adam Vingan teased it at the start of the program. A little breaking news from the Stillman and Company program. According to sources, the Tennessee Titans are targeting Taylor Zarzour of the SEC network as the next play-by-play voice of the Titans. Now, I do not believe that the deal has been offered to Taylor Zarzour. He does the games on Saturday with Matt Stinchcomb on SEC network. I don't think the deal has been offered. And if it hasn't been offered, it's certainly not done. But from what I've been told, what I can gather, Taylor Zarzour will be the next play-by-play voice of the Titans. Called the Titans, they don't have a comment. Okay, so that was 3 weeks ago. Paul takes this story, puts it out there, and I texted Paul because, Paul, he's like the local ombudsman. If Jordan Schultz reports a story 20 seconds after Paul does, Paul gets on it. So I texted Paul, and I said, nice story on Taylor Zarzour. I broke it 3 weeks ago. And Paul asked me to show proof, which I did, to which Paul added, quote, on his tweet, didn't put it in the story, which I think he should. Paul put, credit Jared Stillman, who reported gist of this a while ago. The report adds depth on it being full-time, national-based, rather than previously discussed gun-for-hire idea. Yes, because in 3 weeks, they've been negotiating. That's why. But I'll at least give Paul credit because he tweeted out that I was the first on the story. Unlike Buck and A to Z Sports, Buck texted me for information after I had broken the story, and then A to Z Sports released a story that day saying Buck had the scoop where Buck was 2 steps behind where we already were. It's like, per Buck. I'm like, per Buck. Buck texted me after I broke the story. So at least Paul, who doesn't like me and hates giving me credit for anything, was man enough to admit it. Now, here's the other thing. Not only did I report that 3 weeks ago, and I am proving to be right, but Burke Nihill, the team CEO, sat down with Jim Wyatt for a story at the team's website, and he says they haven't chosen a play-by-play guy yet. Quote, after initially narrowing the list to 10 to 15 candidates, the team reduced that number further, and 3 of them were brought in for in-person interviews. The team is now down to a few finalists. As I told you at the time, it's Zarzour. That was 3 weeks ago. Now the team is trying to tell you. Again, we talk about whether or not the Titans ever tell the truth. Burke Nihill is trying to tell you, no, we've got a couple of candidates that we're working through. Whereas Paul is basically reporting the exact same thing that we told you 3 weeks ago. And here's my favorite part of the situation the Titans find themselves in. They do not want me to be right about this. Like, they do not, the Titans don't want me to be right. The local media doesn't want me to be right. A to Z Sports claimed it was their story. It wasn't. It was mine. They don't want me to be right, but the Titans definitely don't want me to be right. So I think they're having kind of an internal debate. Do we pick the guy we want to pick, the guy that we already picked? But if we do this, we have to accept that Jared was right. And when Jared says we don't tell the truth, well, we're going to have to acknowledge that at least a little bit, because here we are 3 weeks after Jared said we were picking that guy, saying that we haven't picked that guy yet, and then we picked that guy. It does kind of look like we're not telling the truth, right? Or do we hire the guy that we don't want to hire just to make Jared look bad? That's where they are. And I love everything about this. And I have to ask A to Z Sports and Buck and Paul, and again, the Titans saying we're down to a few finalists, even though 3 weeks ago I called the Titans before I went on with the story, and I told them this is what I've heard, and they didn't deny it. Again, they no commented it. Again, what disrespect? What did I do? Such disrespect that I put the story out 3 weeks ago. And everybody's trying to pretend like they have the scoop ahead of me. I know. You guys are reporters, and I'm not. But I believe in giving respect where respect is due. Why you disgrace me, pretending this scoop is yours? Why you tell Jim Wyatt you haven't picked the guy that I said 3 weeks ago you were going to hire? And I don't know why, but that's on them. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Barry Trotz joins us next on the program, as this is one of our final Barry Trotz interviews of the year as the season is winding down. Thank goodness. We'll get to that with Barry next. Stillman & Company, 105 again. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game National Studios and presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The Predators pregame less than an hour away right here on 102.5 The Game tonight at Columbus, 6 o'clock. And there is an animated broadcast on News Channel 5 today. Max Hers will be on the play-by-play. Chris Mason will be the analyst. And I am actually excited to see how my 4-month-old son, again, he likes the moving colors on TV. I'm actually excited to see if he gets into the game. He has gotten into the NCAA tournament. We'll see how he gets into the animated broadcast. But we are joined by Predators general manager Barry Trotz here on the program. Barry, how are you? I want to start with this, which is we're kind of winding down towards the end of the year. This has been a very trying season for the Predators. You guys have officially been eliminated from playoff contention. So when you look at the last part of the season, how does it make you feel given that the season is almost over? Are you relieved or are you somewhat sad?
Probably sad because I think just like anything, you know me, that, I haven't been in this position for a long time. So there is probably a sadness to it because the season didn't go the way that we wanted. But at the same time, relief that it is a little bit, get on to the next thing. The next thing is getting a real good player in the draft, making sure that we do proper evaluations on our players and sort of reset for next year. So there is a finality, if you will, in our season, which we haven't had in a while. So that's something that we knew that was going to come, and it's finally around the corner.
Barry, I know that you said when you took this job that you were going to cook the young guys in the minors. You were not going to microwave them in the NHL. But Matthew Wood just signed his entry-level contract out of Minnesota. He is now officially a Predator. When do you think we'll see him here, and what is the plan now that Matthew Wood is under contract, your 2023 first-round pick?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of players, especially some of the teams that are in our position. A lot of these higher pick draft choices are going from their college teams to the NHL. It's a way of burning a year in their contract. Matthew Wood will be joining us in probably Dallas, get a few practices with the team, and then be inserted into the lineup in some games to get a feel for the National Hockey League, get a feel for that, and then reset at the end of the year and get him on his development program. A lot of the players that are coming up through the college ranks are going to get a taste of it, and then they're going to pro careers. And there's still lots of holes in a lot of these young players' games. So we'll try to give them a real good development path and a plan with Matthew. He's a good young pick. He's a huge body, and a lot of times the bigger guys take a little bit longer. So, but we're going to do what's right. He's got a real good skill set, and getting a taste of the National Hockey League will be really good for him. And we want to do what's right for the players. And as you're seeing, some of the young guys are getting a little bit more opportunity. There's some rules in the National Hockey League that prevent them. Some of our guys, the 4 recall rule limits us what we can do until we get injuries, and now we're starting to have injuries. So you could see some of our younger guys start popping in there a little bit more often here.
When it comes to him actually being a part of the Predators, we know he's a big part of the long-term plan. We know he's probably not part of the short-term plan, but how would you like to see his pro development go? He's got the 2 years in college. Is it something where, hey, he's going to be at Milwaukee next year and he might be there for 2 years, 3 years? How do you kind of see that as far as when you want to start thinking about penciling him into the lineup?
Well, I think the first thing that you want to do is get him into the pro environment, and then you have an idea where he is on your scale of, is he ready for the National Hockey League? Can he produce at the National Hockey League level? Every player is different, and for me to give you a defined answer would be really difficult. But I think let's get him into the pro environment. Let's get him evaluated at the tempo and all the things that you need to do in the National Hockey League. the execution, the detail, all those type of things. Because college, there's a lot of if you watch college really closely, there's lots of good players, but there's a lot of times in some programs there's not a lot of detail, and then you can get away with I'll say a little bit of lack of detail sometimes in the lower ranks. You can do that even in Milwaukee. You can get away with it a little bit more. So the National Hockey League is unforgiving, and you get exposed if you don't have that detail. So we're going to get him in and just evaluate him where he is on his personal scale, so that we can give him a little bit of a time frame, if you will. But I think there's some development growth that he's going to have to go through, just like all young players, because he's still a really young player.
Barry Trotz with us on the program. Joakim Kimmel's still a really young player, though it feels like he's been in Milwaukee for forever. We saw him for a couple of games earlier this year. He's got 16 goals so far in Milwaukee in the minors. I do wonder, how close are you to putting Kimmel in position to be a full-time Predator, the way that Fedor Svechkov has kind of graduated into that role and Luke Evangelista has graduated to that spot?
Yeah, I think Kemi and a guy like Ozzy Weisblatt have had good years. They're probably next in the pod of guys that are going to get more and more looks based on what they've done with Milwaukee, but also where they are in their also growth path. So they're probably the next guys sort of in that pod of guys that are in Milwaukee. So I'm really happy with both those guys. And you're right, Kemi's, you don't realize how young he is, and he feels like he's been in Milwaukee for forever now. So he's a guy that we're having trouble scoring goals. That's what he can do with his shot. He's a competitive guy, so I'd like to get him in a few more games before the season. But as I say, some of the rules limit us a little bit. But we have some injuries right now, and we're at that brink. If we get any more, then it'll give us a lot more flexibility to get some of these young guys in.
I do want to ask you about the injuries. We saw a nasty one for Colton Sissons. That was last night. Is there any sense, or it was over the weekend, is there any sense of whether he's going to return this year or not?
He's being looked at by the medical team, and they're coming up with a decision. But it's very accurate week to week, and I know there's only a couple of weeks left in the season. So I would probably say that he's probably very close to not being back for the rest of the season. But Colton's been. You look at his durability over time. He's been, I think he's missed 5 games in his whole career. So he's resilient. He's been real tough. So we'll just see where he is, in the next couple of weeks. But he's not going to be around in the lineup probably for a week or two here.
Barry Trotz is with us. It's funny. You talk about spots where guys may check in and how hard it is to decide ahead of time, where someone's growth or development may take them. I enjoy kind of putting lineups down on paper. I don't know if that's productive or not, but it's something I enjoy. I look at the back end of this team, Barry, and I think about next season. I think you and I can agree that Yossi, Shea, and Lazan probably are all set to be in the mix next year at the NHL level.
Yep.
Then after that, it's a bunch of young guys who have gotten opportunities this year, one way or another. We know about Tanner Mullendijk, who hasn't been put into the pro level yet, or at least the North American or the USA pro level. And yet I look at the other guys, Wilsby and Stastny and Blankenberg, and I wonder, okay, who has worked themselves into the mix next season outside of Yossi, Shea, and Lazan? And then how many spots are you looking at on the back end saying, I have to go out there and fill them?
Well, I look at it. I think Wilsby was a guy that I thought was really trending well for us, and he was probably that group, probably the lead guy in that sort of all those guys that came up from Milwaukee, and then Blankenberg's come in and done a really good job. I would think Wilsby would probably, going into next season, I would probably have him in that same spot. And then obviously, I think if you look at the growth of young Barron, he's got better and better since we've gotten him. He's playing really good hockey. Hopefully, I don't jinx him, but he's really sort of steadied his game, got a little confidence, and see his upside is really good. So I would think that he's a guy that's going to be in the mix for sure with us because of the upside and his age, and then I probably have to fill one hole. I have to do it either at the draft or before the season starts. I'd like to fill a hole unless we can do it internally, and that internally could be a Molendyk. Molendyk is pushed for a position on our team the last 2 training camps, and if he comes in and he's such an elite skater, maybe he's the guy that fills it. But I would probably look to fill one more spot going into next year.
Can I give you the opinion I had that Hal Gill completely shot down last week? Again, you're the general manager. I'm not, but this is just something I'm thinking about. I wonder, what would it look like if Tanner Molendyk made the team out of camp next year and was on that top pair with Roman Josi? Would that be too much to ask of him too early, or is that kind of a way to feed a young defenseman? Yes, you're going to be playing some of the best matchups in the league, but you're going to be doing it with Roman Josi kind of showing you the way. What do you think of that?
I you know what? It's not out of the realm because I did that as a coach. If you look back at I put Seth Jones with Shea Weber in Seth's first go round. If you have the right guy, it can work. And Yos is a tremendous defenseman. If it feels right, I think his skating could do it. The little defensive details might be a little bit of a lot to chew off, but at the same time, I think the physical skills of being able to get around the ice, to think at a high level, I think Tanner has a lot of those abilities. So it's probably a little bit of a stretch, but it's not an outrageous thought, that's for sure.
Barry Trotz is with us. One thing I'm wondering, Barry, when it comes to kind of the future, and again, kind of putting those lineups on paper, last year, even before the big point streak, that first line of Forsberg, O'Reilly, and Nyquist established themselves. They played 62 games together last season. This year, because of the inconsistencies in play and the new guys, the legacy players, as you'll call them, kind of coming in, there was a lot of mixing and matching as far as the line combinations were concerned. When you start to think about what you want next season and who you want on the NHL roster next season, is there kind of a look back and thought that maybe let's stick with these lines a little bit longer next season just to see if we can build some consistency?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've talked to Bruno about. We're trying to dissect the first quarter, the second quarter, third quarter, that type of thing. There is some I'll say some credence to that. One of the things that sort of put us in a little bit of a blender early was the fact that we got off to such a poor start. We couldn't score. We went 0-5 at home. We didn't seem to have it together. And then what happens is you're looking for that chemistry because you're starting the season 0-5 and you're digging yourself a hole and there's different pressures. And I think looking back at that, you needed some consistency. You needed to stick maybe a little longer with something to pull it together. So you see as the year goes on, there's pairs that always work, and then that third element of that line is the little bit of the wild card. And I think going into next season, Bruno has a real good situation where you see Alex Svechkov. Can he play right now? Unfortunately, we got so many injuries that can a guy like Svechkov, for instance, play a second line for a whole year? Might be a lot. Is he better off in the third line? Stamkos on the second line. Who's best with Marchessault and Stamkos? Or should they be separated? Is Marchie better with Svechkov. Bunting has been a guy that's come in, and I look at him as I said, take him out of a little bit of free agency, or us out of free agency. He gives a little bit of speed. Could he play with, maybe it's a guy like Marchie and Svechkov who can transport the puck, and then Marchie does his stuff down low. So we're talking about all those different things and trying to dissect that. And so I think we'll have a better handle on that next year. And I think the guys, as I call legacy players, are going to have they've had their closure, other than probably Marchessault, who hasn't, we're going to Vegas next week, I believe. And, he will finally have his closure real late in the season, but they've all had their closure. And I think, Brady Shea, you see he's been one of our best defensemen for quite a while now. He's transitioned over. So I think we're going to be in a better place. Our young guys are around the corner, and that's what the exciting thing about it is, the young guys coming, and guys like Svechkov and LaRue and a guy like Weisblatt, who gives you some speed and energy. So I want to get quicker. I want to get younger, and surround these young guys with these older guys, so we have a nice blend. So that's where we are, and we've got to look towards next year, and we got to get through the rest of this year, because we are pretty lean right now. There's a lot of names and faces that are out there right now that are fighting for jobs, and some of them will be back with us, and some of them won't.
Last one for you, Barry Trotz with us. You're 2-7-1 in your last 10. You've lost 3 in a row, which I know is not good, or at least not good traditionally. But we talked a couple weeks ago, really in pertaining to Andrew Burnett's job status, but also other guys making the team next year or being on the radar for next year. And you talked about, hey, just liking the way that the team is playing. I thought that St. Louis game was probably the best thing that could have happened, where the team plays tough the entire game, loses in regulation by 1/10 of a second. It's like you don't gain up in the standings, but the team showed, the fierce determination to try to come back and win that game. Are you pleased with the effort that you're getting and what the players are doing, even if you're not winning games? Because we talked about that being a big thing for you to watch down the stretch, Barry.
Yeah, I am. You look at, we just played probably the 2 hottest teams, and we played St. Louis 3 times. They are on an absolute heater. You're playing a very deep team in Vegas. They're on an absolute heater as well as on a team. They're gearing up. They're ready, and we're playing them, straight up. Like you said, could have got a point or a win against St. Louis. I thought we played very well against Vegas. Fell asleep for 2 shifts and changed the game, but for the most part, our effort is really consistent. It's been good. We're getting good goaltending. You look at, I was looking at St. Louis, the shot suppressing with our defense being what it is. Our forwards are working. You see 5 guys up and down the ice. Those things matter. We're in every game. We're battling, and there's no quit. So that says a lot to me. And you're right. I did say the scores don't matter. They don't matter where we are right now. But at the same time, I think we evaluate the effort, we evaluate the try, the focus, all those things. And sometimes you can't control the score. Teams are maybe a little deeper, a little bit better, got a little more vibe, whatever, just feeling it. But we are working, and that says a lot to me.
Barry Trotz, as always, good stuff. Barry, we'll chat next week.
All right, take care.
Yep, Barry Trotz joining us on the program as always. Predators tonight, 6:00. Columbus, an animated broadcast, first time ever, an animated broadcast on News Channel 5, 6:00 tonight. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
Preds hockey night in Smashville.
Walk over to Yossi. His one-timer, he scores!
Bringing you the keys to victory and the latest storylines surrounding the Nashville Predators. This is Predators Game Day, now on Stillman and Company.
Predators Game Day is presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. That's my realtor. Get your house seen, heard, and sold with TJ Anderson of Benchmark Realty. Tonight, the Predators take on the Columbus Blue Jackets, 6 o'clock, right here on 102.5 and 106.3 The Game. And the game will be broadcast on News Channel 5 with a special animated broadcast, which I am very excited about. Tonight on News Channel 5, Max Hers will have that call. Columbus 33-30-9, good for 75 points. Predators 27-39-8, 62 points. You just heard Barry Trotz. They're playing out the string. Here is what is important about tonight's game. Look, I'm sorry. I am rooting for them to lose. I watched the game last night. I'm not going to get worked up if they lose. In fact, I want it to happen. Let's just get this godforsaken season over and move on to next year. If the Predators lose in regulation to the Blue Jackets, their odds to win the draft lottery don't improve that much. They only go from 11% to 11.2%. But if they lose, it goes down to 10.7%. For the Blue Jackets, this is a big game. They're not likely to make the playoffs, but if they win, they got a shot. So, again, 2 more weeks to go. And then the season is over, and we can move on to hope that, as bad as this year was, next year hopefully can be a little bit better, and hopefully with a top pick like James Higgins or Michael Misa playing second-line center for the Predators. Predators Game Day presented by TJ Anderson Homes and Benchmark Realty, online at tjandersonhomes.com. Okay, we got that out of the way, Preds Game Day, because Trevor Matich is next. His latest. Now that the Cam Ward Pro Day is out of the way, we'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for The Game. Stillman and Company, let's give something away before we get to Trevor. Be caller 5 right now at 615-737-1025, and you will win tickets to see Good Clean Fun on Tuesday, April 8th at the Ryman Auditorium, hosted by Aaron Weber and featuring comedians Ryan Hamilton, Dustin Nickerson, Derek Stroop, Lace Larrabee, Mia Jackson, and Paula Kozinski. So good luck on that one. Caller 5-615-737-1025. So today, the big news from the owners' meetings, as far as the Titans are concerned, is that Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News reported that it was spotted at the coffee shop at the Breakers Hotel, where the owners' meetings are being held, that Giants general manager Joe Shane, Titans general manager Mike Borgonzi sat down together and were sipping coffee this morning and had a brief chat in front of everybody, which again makes me think that the Titans keep telling people, hey, we're interested in listening on trading the number 1 pick. We're not just all in on Cam Ward. So what does that mean? Trevor Matich joins us now, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, I want to start here, which is you're the general manager of the Titans. You have the pick for Cam Ward. Brandon Allen and Will Levis are still in your quarterback room, so it's certainly nothing to brag about. What exactly, how important would it be to you to find a way to make a deal with the Giants to try to add some draft capital to move back to number 3? Or how staunch would you be of saying, well, I've got Cam Ward, so I'm going to take him unless you just blow my socks off? How do you kind of see the scenario the Titans see themselves in right now?
You know, the great thing about it, Jared, is that the Titans have done a masterful job of making a whole bunch of different scenarios plausible. It is very plausible, and a lot of people believe that they love Cam Ward, and it would take an offer that knocked their socks off in order to come off of Cam Ward and trade out of that number 1 pick. They also have done a masterful job of making people believe that they're not that crazy about Shedeur Sanders. You know, some of the top people in upper management are not going to the University of Colorado Pro Day, you know, and it seems like overtly that they're nonchalant about Shedeur Sanders. And maybe they are, but maybe they really want Shedeur. Maybe they want people to think that they want to take Cam Ward with the number 1 pick, but what they really want to do is up the price on Cam Ward, up the value, perceived value of Cam Ward, by making it seem like, yeah, he's our guy unless you knock our socks off, so that somebody will pay the price to go up there and get him when they really want Shedeur, and they don't want to drop down in the draft in the first round and then have someone else leap above them, trade above them to take Shedeur, knowing that the Titans will take Shedeur because the Titans like him. See what I'm saying? So there's all kinds of different scenarios that the management of this team, the coaching staff of this team, has put out there that are plausible. I mean, it's really good misdirection, pre-draft, smokescreen stuff. Now, if I am the Titans, my thought is, you know, why are you picking who you're picking with that? Why are you doing what you're doing with that number 1 pick? And you and I have talked about how the worst thing they can do is take Cam Ward because they want to sell tickets for the new stadium. Take Cam Ward because the head coach thinks that, you know, he's got to have the quarterback right now because his job might be in jeopardy if he doesn't start developing a young quarterback. Those are terrible reasons to take Cam Ward with the number 1 pick. But right now, I see the most likely scenario that they would, one, want to trade back and build a team like the Philadelphia Eagles are built, where they don't necessarily have the best quarterback in the NFL, but boy, do they have the best offensive line and defensive line and the best team around, great wide receivers, et cetera, around the quarterback that they've got. And I think they would prefer to start that process unless they think that Cam Ward is Andrew Luck, unless they think Cam Ward is the number 1 pick worthy quarterback that will be the face of this franchise for 10 years that they can build around, and they have as much certainty as you can have in this process that he is that guy. So my thought is that what they're really trying to do is make everyone believe that Cam Ward is Andrew Luck, but they're willing to trade him if they get the right deal.
Trevor, with that being said, again, you're still the general manager of the Titans. I have said if I'm the Giants, I'm making the trade to number 1 because I need a young quarterback that shows my owner and shows my fans that we have direction going forward to justify my employment. Again, they took their swing on Daniel Jones. It didn't work. They gave him the contract. They tried to trade up for Drake May last year. It didn't work. They passed on McCarthy. They passed on Penix. They passed on Nix at number 6 last year. They now are kind of backed into a corner. I would make the move. And if I'm the Giants, what I would do at first is I'd be willing to go 3, 34, 99, which is the second of their 2 third-round picks, and a second next year. Now, if I'm the Titans, I would turn that down right now. But let's say push comes to shove. You're the general manager of the Titans. What would you rather have? 3, 34, 99, and next year's second from the Giants with Shedeur Sanders at quarterback, or Cam Ward at quarterback with no extra picks?
I would rather have the picks with Shedeur Sanders. I don't know how much difference there is as a practical matter between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think Cam Ward has more natural arm talent. But I think from a standpoint of executing the quarterback position, in other words, being an effective leader and distributor to your playmakers, I don't know how much difference there really is between those two. And I would rather have the more players to build around them. And think of it this way. If the Titans trade down to number 3 with the Giants and the Giants go take Cam Ward, there are mock drafts that have the Cleveland Browns at number 2 taking Shedeur Sanders. But if that happens, then the Titans will have the choice between Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State, and Travis Hunter, the receiver/corner from Colorado. And they are still with a fantastic playmaker that they'll get at the top of the draft. And then they can work on quarterback in different ways, because I don't know that anybody believes that the top of this quarterback draft is a slam dunk. And so I would rather have Shedeur and those extra picks. And if the Browns take Shedeur, so the Cam Ward goes at number 1 to the Giants, Shedeur goes number 2 to the Browns, and then the Titans are at number 3, I would take either Hunter or Carter. And for me, I'd take the edge rusher. I'd take Carter if it's me, and never look back and be really happy with what I did.
Trevor, where do you see Jackson Dart in all of this? The mock drafts all have him going in the first round. I did a mock draft last week. I have him going at 14 to the Saints. I have the Saints trading back from 9 and going to 14 and taking Jackson Dart. Where do you see him in all of this?
Jackson Dart is a bit of a wild card. He's one of those guys that if you believe you can develop him, then you are going to get a quarterback that's going to be really good at a good value, late in the first round or high in the second. And remember, there's just a couple things about him. He was incredibly productive, but in throwing deep against zone coverage, he kind of struggled. He was really good throwing deep against man coverage, but the book on him in the NFL coming in, whenever he does play, is going to be give him deep zone looks and make him throw underneath. And then when it comes into his footwork needs a lot of work. But then again, so does Cam Ward, so does Shedeur Sanders. So I think he's kind of a wild card. I don't know how far down he would be from a Shedeur Sanders or even a Cam Ward from a standpoint of his NFL potential, because all 3 of those guys, their potential will require development in terms of their ability to read defenses and especially their technique in the pocket and outside the pocket. All 3 of those guys have that they really have to work on. But all 3 of them have good arms that have a chance to be good NFL starting caliber arms. So he's the kind of a guy that, if I'm not completely sold on Ward or Sanders, I wouldn't mind taking Jackson Dart late in the first round and hoping to develop the guy. So, he might take away some of the options for teams like the Saints to trade up. The Saints might say at number 9, look, we want Shedeur, we really do, but how far up in the first round do we want to trade if he doesn't fall? We can just take Jackson Dart at number 9, or we can take Jackson Dart, we can trade back up into the first round. So Jackson Dart is one of those guys that will affect a lot of other things in the draft because of his projection, which is all over the place from early second round to late first round.
More with Trevor Matich next. Stillman and Company, including the development that he just talked about Cam Ward, what Rich Ganon had to say. We'll hit that with Trevor next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Yeah, when you have that first overall pick in the draft, I think if you just look at recent history, a lot of those teams are in that position for a reason. The quarterback position has held them back, and they're going to try and go out and get one. And I think the Tennessee Titans are that team. I think they're sold on one of these quarterbacks, and I think if you read between the lines, it leads you to believe that it is in fact Cam Ward. I think he's the one that's probably most ready to play, in my opinion. And I think he's probably going to be the day one starter. When you're the first overall pick in the draft, there's a real sense of urgency from the owner, from the general manager, from the organization to cut these guys loose. And I think the other thing that sometimes works against them is when you look at the success that some of these quarterbacks had last year. When you look at Jaden Daniels, the success that he had, Bo Nix, both those quarterbacks took their team to the postseason. Of course, Jaden Daniels was the offensive rookie of the year and took his team to the NFC Championship game. That's unusual.
That was Rich Ganon on Sirius XM NFL Radio, former NFL MVP. Trevor Matich with us, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, that's not all Rich Ganon had to say about Cam Ward. Rich Ganon, in this long scouting report about Cam Ward, summarized Cam Ward with this.
But overall, he's got plenty of talent and physical skills, I think, to develop into an NFL starting quarterback. I think he's going to go to the Tennessee Titans, and he's going to probably play before he's ready, and we'll see how it works out.
Trevor, with that, do you think Cam Ward is ready? Because, again, Rich Gannon, I think, is pretty much sold that he's the most ready, but not ready.
No, he's not ready to play the full gamut, to open the full playbook. It would be up to the coaching staff to figure out pretty quickly what he can do well, and then put him in position to do those things, and then expand that playbook for him as defenses figure out what they're doing. Because you have that limited slice of a playbook, defenses will jump all over that pretty quickly. I mean, that's what happened to Cam Ward. His first season, his rookie season, he was just phenomenal. Nobody knew what to do with him from a defensive standpoint. But then defenses started to adjust, and Cam didn't adjust as fast as the defenses did. Same thing happened to Colin Kaepernick with the 49ers. And so this is one thing that the Commanders did a great job with Jaden Daniels, was that they put him in position to do what he did well, but then they kept expanding the slices of playbook that he was able to access in order to stay ahead of defenses. And Cam Ward's not ready to play right now. Physically, he has a lot of work to do on his timing. And, mentally, obviously, there's a lot that he'll need to know, but that's not his fault. It's just the nature of quarterbacks. I will suggest this, though, that the physical nature of footwork and marrying his footwork with his eyes and his arm is far more critical in the NFL than it is in college. Because in college, receivers, when they're open, they're pretty darn open. In the NFL, that window is much smaller, and the time when it opens and then closes is when that ball has to arrive. And very often the progressions and the route trees are developed by the offensive coordinator so that the quarterback will drop, look at his first progression, and then if that's not there, he'll hitch one time, look at his second progression. If that's not there, he'll hitch a second time, look at his third progression, and his feet and his eyes need to go 1, 2, 3 so that when the ball is released, it's on time based on the steps, based on the hitches. And so the ball comes out at the time when it will arrive to the receiver at the proper time when he's open based on the anticipated coverage. So, these are things that footwork and things like that are really important. Just because you throw the ball well in the pro day, it's kind of interesting, but it's not really that important when it comes to, or it's not that indicative of what you can do in the NFL. So, he'll have a lot of things that he'll need to work on. I think Rich Gannon is right. I think he will develop into a good NFL starter, I think. But the question is he the guy that you want at number one, the number one pick? That's the real question with Shedeur and with Cam. Are they good enough to be taken that high? Or are they guys that you figure can develop into that, and therefore it's worth the risk to go ahead and overdraft, which happens a lot with quarterbacks, happens often with quarterbacks? Or do you evaluate the guy from a standpoint of number one pick in the draft needs to have a certain kind of an impact for the next 10 years? Can I count on this quarterback to do it? And Cam Ward, can he do it? he's probably the best risk in this entire draft, but Shador's not far behind him. And you know what? Tyler Shuck of Louisville and Jackson Dart of Ole Miss, they may well rise up and have just as good a career as those two guys.
Trevor, Chad Brinker said that Will Levis will have an opportunity to compete for the starting job. They haven't taken any calls on him. They haven't made any calls on him. Do you think there's still hope for Will Levis?
Yes. Yes. What I'm about to say, a lot of fans are not going to like. But Will Levis got a raw deal and an unfair label as the face of one of the most inept passing attacks in the entire NFL over the last several years. And Levis made some incredibly, horrifically bad decisions that turned into turnovers that cost them games, right?
Sure.
And he was trying to make a play. He knew that he didn't have anything to work with, and he was trying to make something happen. So I think he gets some credit for that competitive nature, that side of it. Keep in mind that the offensive line, look at how much different it is now. I mean, take away last year where they had a rookie draft choice over there, left tackle. For the several years before that, the left tackle situation was heinous. I mean, if they would have improved from heinous to merely awful at left tackle, fans would have loved it. Well, then J.C. Latham went over there last year. He did better, than they had in the past. But now they brought in Dan Moore, free agent, who's a steady, solid, reliable NFL left tackle. And they went from heinous to pretty good at left tackle. Then they take J.C. Latham, move him back to right tackle, where they have been heinous for several years. And they improved from heinous to potentially devastating. And with J.C. Latham developing at right tackle. Then they bring in Kevin Zeitler at right guard, assuming Lloyd Cushenberry at center, he heals his injury well. And I think Peter Skorowski is getting better every year. This offensive line went from heinous as a group to what's expected to be a very solid group, something that Will Levis has not had a chance to work with. And then his receivers and tight ends have been one of the most abysmal as a group since Levis has been thrown out here in the NFL. He's got no protection. He's got negative protection. He's got horrific protection. And receivers that as a group are not getting open and not making plays for him. And he's trying to make plays, but making mistakes on the way. And because of that, Levis has not had a chance to show what he can do. I think if with the improvement in the offensive line, if they could bring in some good young receivers to add to Calvin Ridley, Levis might end up being as good a quarterback as Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward will be in the NFL. I don't think they should bail on Levis right now because I don't think they have any idea how good Levis can be. And I think the fact that the label that's been hung around his neck that is more the offensive line and the receivers than it ever was him is totally unfair to Will Levis. And I would love to see him have a chance to compete for that starting job with better people around him.
Trevor Matich, as always, presented by Houston Clinic Orthopedics, when experience matters. Trevor, great stuff.
Thanks, Jared.
Yep. Robbie Stanley has the pregame show for the Preds next. Again, the animated broadcast, News Channel 5. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 2.